You don't get to bring friends.
For a guy who kills it as the backroom dealing deceiving manipulator better than most as Littlefinger, he actually impresses as the tad doofy, thinks he's in control CIA bro. And this time it's an Irishman nailing an American accent.
Or perhaps he's wondering why someone would shoot a man before throwing him out of a plane.
Speaking of accents, eloquence. I guess a lot of people hated the Bane voice, at least the first version that was completely unintelligible, but I've always loved it. I don't envy anyone having to follow Heath Ledger's now iconic Joker voice, but Tom Hardy is a definite contender. And while we're talking about Ledger's Joker, he had one of the best villain intros ever. So to do a longer, drawn-out reveal would have felt tedious this time around. And Bane is a different kind of baddie. No pretense, no real showmanship, here he is.
It would be extremely painful.
You're a big guy.
For you. No one cared who I was till I put on the mask.
And that's a reoccurring theme in this film set up right away. He doesn't mean the literal apparatus, but the symbol that the mask represents. Not dissimilar to Batman's. It's no mistake that his mask essentially covers the opposite parts of the face as the cowl.
Crashing this plane.
Oh man, Gotham's Reckoning. What a composition! Heads up, this will not be the last time Hans Zimmer's score gets one. Yep, I know, just a simple drop down. But come on, Tom Hardy kills it. He never breaks eye contact, shows no fear, and his serious physical presence in one quick move. Okay, I know I've already given so many wins to this opening, but it's one of the best, most well thought out, tense, and visually stunning openings to any film. Every word out of Bane's mouth puts you on edge, and while you're totally terrified of him, you can't help but fanboy over how cool he is.
Calm down, Doctor. Now's not the time for fear. That comes later.
Bane is finally portrayed as the mastermind he's supposed to be, and this plan to get captured scene has more solid reasoning behind it than usual. Bane needed Bruce and the world to think Pavel was dead so he could arm the bomb unimpeded later. So this quick blood transfusion is a good way to confirm Pavel's death in the wreckage. We also see on-the-spot loyalty from Bane's men willing to die for his fire.
Yes, the fire rises.
Side note, I love that this first scene attempts to reintroduce the realism of this series with the chest compressions to pump Pavel's blood over the corpse. Also some expectation subversion with the plane not exploding in a ball of fire below them. Much more understated and tense.
But you understand only money and the power you think it buys. So why waste my time? Indeed.
So just as a fun rundown, Daggett is currently employing Bane without realizing Bane is actually in charge, and Bane is really working for Talia, who is throwing shade at a guy she's manipulating behind the scenes while still proselytizing League of Shadows ideals. Layered. Gotta give it up to Anne Hathaway. The way she relaxes her face and shoulders and turns off the startled maid routine to let her true colors through. It's not the last time either.
Can I have a ride?
And is it just me, or is there a touch of whatever Lola wants in Catwoman's theme?
Oops. Nobody told me it was uncrackable.
Whimsical piano slyly twinkling in the background. Amazing either way.
I know exactly who he was. He was the Batman.
You know I love J.K. Simmons, so jury's still out on what he can bring to the role, but Gary Oldman. Have I mentioned that Gary Oldman is always a win? He is Commissioner Gordon. Smiley face bed.
Fascinating. You two should exchange notes over coffee.
Maybe in Florence? The main thing that keeps me coming back to this film are the performances. Even in a sort of ancillary scene like this, her performance and shifting facade are phenomenal. And her insurance plan with the congressman, having this dude use his phone once she knew she'd been screwed over, shows us that she's an intelligent strategist. Anti-stormtrooper aim from that guy from Dirt. What? You guys don't remember that Courtney Cox show about a trashy magazine where Monica ruined every last feeling of innocence about her character that only lasted one season?
Why are you here?
Answer him.
I was asking you.
And Bane's second intro is just as intimidating as the first. You never ever know what he's thinking or actually saying. Doesn't hurt that he executes a death by choking, only second to Darth Vader. Also, Tom Hardy's workout routine. Also, badass bad guy. That won't be the last time I say that.
He's dead.
So show me his body.
Ugh, Bane. He plays it like he's already seen the way things play out, so there's really no need to ever get excited. The Nolan Batman films, well, really Nolan films in general, have some of my favorite scores, and Rises is no exception. The constant percussive building in the background present in Gotham's Reckoning now added to some beautiful orchestral pieces to make the fire rises.
Shouldn't you be telling your superior officers about this?
They asked me if he saw any giant alligators.
Listen, alligators and killer crocs are different things.
Practice smiling in a mirror. It's like putting on a mask.
Man, does Joseph Gordon-Levitt kill this monologue. And he appropriately continues the theme of masks.
But I'm still a believer in the Batman. even if you're not.
And I'm good with Blake knowing. I think I brought this up in The Dark Knight, but the hardest part about Batman, and even harder for Superman, at least in the film versions, is no one ever deciphering their identities. I believe people do know, but won't admit it to themselves. I think Gordon knew it would be easy to find out, but didn't want to know.
That's because there is no cartilage in your knee, and not much of any use in your elbows or your shoulders.
Another realistic look at the toll being Batman would take on an actual human body. Also, stop pretending to be a doctor, Lieutenant Dangle. Fun callback to the first conversation they had together. It's actually really moving to see how far they've come.
You have to invest if you want to restore balance to the world.
Who else was all about restoring balance?
Yeah? Who are you pretending to be?
Bruce Wayne.
Ha! True. And appropriately, Bruce is the only one not wearing a mask at the costume ball, since it wouldn't be in his best interest, and if Rachel is to be believed, the Bruce Wayne face is his mask.
There's a storm coming, Mr. Wayne.
Meteorology lessons.
You sound like you're looking forward to it.
I'm adaptable.
And adaptability.
My rule.
Why?
Keep them from falling into the wrong hands.
Well, I guess technically most of it doesn't fall into Bane's hands. They kind of climb up on it.
Works fine. Except for the autopilot.
Self-sacrifice shadowing. And now I want to go watch Bronson again. Okay, I will.
There's no money you can steal.
Really? And why are you people here?
Bane gets like an anti-sincerity win. Nothing out of his mouth is ever straightforward. It's always laced with sarcasm and social commentary. Love him. Who's he nodding to? Doesn't matter.
Thank you.
Politeness.
Boy, you are in for a show tonight, son.
Truer words, Gotham Cop, truer words. And bold move for Batman's first appearance to be 45 minutes into this movie, but dang does it pay off. I'm not going to defend every plot hole levied at this film, but some are just so easy to refute. See, time marches on even when you go into a tunnel. When they leave the stock exchange, it's dusk. Doesn't matter when the market opens, maybe they're there all day. And maybe the Gotham Stock Exchange doesn't open till dusk. I think the confusion is that this scene is a little overexposed. But see these lights glowing against the stone building? There's no direct overhead light, meaning the sun is low in the sky. As time progresses, the light gets dimmer, signifying dusk turning to night. Also, it's like symbolism for the Dark Knight's return, man. Get with it. Her goggles look like cat ears. Ingenuity.
Like a rat in a trap, gentlemen.
You might have the wrong animal there, sir.
Yup. So, obviously letting this through is about as sinful as it comes. But I cut them slack because Nolan improved his own game by lengthening the fight cuts even more from The Dark Knight and exponentially from Batman Begins. So stuff like that does happen with longer takes. Did I mention badass bad guy? Just a simple hands on the lapels somehow makes Bane even more terrifying. His swagger will make you avert your eyes.
So that's what that feels like.
I know, bat growl to yourself. But think about it, the disappearing is generally just an illusion. When Batman does it, he just moves out of sight. He doesn't teleport away like his nemesis Angier. Whoa, wrong movie. Point is, I'm sure he assumes Selina is like hanging right over the ledge. So he's not gonna whip his mask off and say, gee, that must be how people feel when Batman, my alter ego as Bruce Wayne, does that.
I know what this means.
What does it mean?
It means your hatred, but it might also mean saving your life.
Goodbye, Alfred.
The easy way out, and the predictable way out of a scene like this, is Bruce yelling and turning to anger. But that's not the relationship these two have, and Nolan honors that by letting them both be wounded and emotional.
Crazy gambling on futures has not only cost Mr. Wayne his seat, it's cost us all a lot of money, and he has to go.
Danny Rayburn, Krennic, and he's going to be Nolan Sorrento and the Sheriff of Nottingham next year? Ben Mendelsohn continues to win most unlikable guy in Hollywood year after year.
Stay here. I'm in charge.
Do you feel in charge?
Oh man, one of those moments that will go down in history. So much power. Doesn't grab his jacket, doesn't even lay his hand palm down. Just a light resting on his shoulder. I would have peed my pants.
Yeah, it's not much, but it's more than you've got right now.
Actually, they're letting me keep the house.
Silver linings. So, I'll be honest that I felt like this happened so fast and was out of nowhere, but when I really started thinking about it, Talia is purposefully manipulating Bruce here. She knows everything about him. She knows he lost Rachel, and she's using the emptiness inside him to gain his trust to get him to drop his guard. But most importantly, she's doing something that Bane will expound on soon. She's planting a seed of hope in Bruce. Hope of a life beyond Batman that he thought he'd lost, only to set him up to be crushed. And much like how clear it is that Blake is really this universe's Robin once you pay attention, Miranda's secret identity is telegraphed more than you realize. From the League of Shadows scar to some of her lines that could have come right out of her father's mouth.
Suffering builds character.
Yep. Another example of how Nolan has grown as a filmmaker since Begins. He's still able to employ the fear that Batman has always tried to instill without resorting to quick cuts. tough fight to be sure, even the first time through. Even if you didn't know the man who broke the bat story, you had to assume halfway through the film Batman wasn't going to come out victorious. But what an awesome battle. Love that Bane still respects Batman for at least what he was.
This has cost you your strength. Victory has defeated you.
Actually giving him multiple excuses for not being up to Bane's standards and complimenting him where he deserves it.
You fight like a younger man. There's nothing held back.
And while Bane does monologue throughout, there's no sizing each other up moment. Batman just goes for it, as Bane says.
Let's not stand on ceremony here.
Ugh, just a straight up brawl, no background score, just the grunts and landing blows.
And you betrayed us.
Also, Bane's a freaking beast.
You think darkness is your ally? You merely adopted the dark. I was born in it.
And even for the viewers, Bane takes something that we feel comfortable in for Batman and twists it to his advantage, and something to fear. Ooh, that's brutal. Cracking the cowl?
I was wondering what would break first. Your spirit? Or your body?
Yeah, that's also brutal.
I learned here that there can be no true despair without hope.
And now Bane explains why they'll go to the trouble of pretending to give the city back to the people. Similarly to the Joker before him, he wants to see the Gothamites tear each other apart, this time based on the lie of hope, freedom, and liberation.
And for the sake of your children, Dr. Pavel. Indeed, I hope it does.
And if you're wondering why Pavel helps them, that quick line is why. Captain America level ricochet skills.
That's a lovely, lovely voice.
Compliments. Beautiful beard win. Yikes. Talk about terror and confusion. Killing the mayor, killing a bunch of football players for some reason, murdering someone in front of a crowd with your bare hands and letting everyone know they're trapped with a bomb.
Play the corners, rookie.
Geometry advice.
One thing must be understood above all others.
Ooh, love the flip of the Batman theme. Instead of stepping up triumphantly like normal, it steps down in defeat.
And we give it back to you, the people.
For the record, Bane said it best.
Oh, there are many forms of immortality.
And if you think about it, since Talia was born in the Lazarus Pit, he kind of did end up being reborn and immortal. And let's talk about this homage to Begins with Ra's al Ghul coming again to Bruce in prison. It's almost the same lighting and composition. Bruce Wayne training montage is the fastest way to remind me how much I love this score. Also, Christian Bale's workout routine. Of all the IRL interpretations of Batman comic lore, the Lazarus Pit is one of my favorites. Instead of being some mystical, physical restoring ooze, Nolan turned it into a soul rejuvenator.
Survival is the spirit, the soul.
Ah, supplies for your journey. Oh, that's wonderful. That's
optimism.
No, I'm not afraid. I'm angry.
A good line. A moving line. But he's still missing the key ingredient.
You do not fear death. How can you move faster than possible without the most powerful impulse of the spirit, the fear of death? Then make the climb as the child is, without the rope.
What does that mean?
Rise.
And here's a completion to a 3-movie arc. Bruce finally escapes the pit. He fell down the well as a child and has always been there. His father rescued him with a rope. Harvey Dent was his rope to leave Batman behind. Rachel was his rope to escape the fear of being alone. He finally drops the rope and jumps to freedom, embracing and owning the fear to the chance of rise in one of the most emotionally charged scenes in this trilogy. And now the Batman theme is given even more power with a little extra distortion on the horns.
Sold! One man in the cold sweat.
Cillian Murphy is always a win, even in a tiny cameo as Scarecrow Judge. He's even got straw coming out of his shoulders. Hey, it's Bane. And more recently, MK from Into the Badlands. Yes, it's a fun show. Just watch it. I know you're annoyed because The Walking Dead used to try to shove it down your throat, but it's a decent show. Alright, another perceived plot hole time jump, but if you're willing to accept that I've edited this together chronologically, shortly after Bruce's first Lazarus Pit escape failure, Fox says,
"And it will go off in 23 days.
Then when he emerges, we get a brief shot of a city in the distance, meaning he didn't have to go too far to get to civilization. And right before he shows up, Gordon confirms,
What is that gonna do tomorrow when that thing blows?
So it took him over 3 weeks to get back. I'm just saying that's more than enough time for me. Showing his journey in a 164-minute movie would have been way more annoying. How'd he get back in? He's freaking Batman. But seriously, Bane's men didn't actually care about anyone entering or leaving. That was a bluff. The bomb was going off no matter what. Side note, who knew Detective Quinn had it in him?
Take 1 step forward, we will shoot you. If you take 2 steps forward, we will blow the bridge.
Talia had the trigger and she was waiting for Bruce's hope to be piqued before she destroyed the city. And it was even proven a bluff when they killed the special ops guys and then didn't detonate the bomb. It would have been really easy for Bruce to get into the city.
You think we're going out onto that ice willingly? You have another thing coming.
Death, then. Death! By exile.
Generosity. Saving the bat and the fox. Discretion.
Impossible.
Ha! First time Bane seems genuinely surprised. Won't ever complain about bats kicking butt. Catwoman on the bat pod is a win.
I'm not asking you to walk down Grand in your dress blues.
No, see, he said you don't need to march down the street in your dress blues. But gotta give Foley some points for courage and finally doing the right thing. Batwing to the rescue!
What do you mean it's just called the Bat? That's what Fox called it. You don't know what Batman calls it. Yeah, no one calls her Catwoman either.
You know, even now, knowing the outcome, the setup for this showdown still gives me butterflies. Batman going up against his ultimate physical nemesis again, Tom Hardy pun intended. Not for nothing, but Batman is confronting Bane in broad daylight. Not something he typically does. Dude loves the shadows and darkness. But when your enemy says things like,
I didn't see the light until I was already a man. By then it was nothing to me but blinding.
Take it to him on a bright snowy day. Also, fights in the snow are awesome. And how satisfying is it to see Batman in daylight fighting alongside the cops who've hunted him for years? I've read lots of complaints about the choreography being bad, which I won't totally disagree with, and this final fight not having any meaning or real difference from the first fight. For me, there are two differences. First, the Batman that emerged from the pit is not the same man whose back was broken in the sewers. He emerged embracing fear as opposed to welcoming death. Second is that while it's not spelled out, there is a reason that once the first piece of Bane's mask is damaged, that every blow from Batman has this sound. Rather than relying on brute strength like in the first fight where he was outmatched, he used his strategy to weaken Bane, and that's how he beats him. Also, Bane is still a beast, and a badass bad guy.
I broke you. How have you come back?
You think you're the only one who could learn the strength to escape.
But I never escaped.
Snap! That twist. I know, some of us saw it coming. But the confused look on Bane's face that gives you that sinking feeling in your stomach.
You'll just have to imagine the fire.
Catwoman to the rescue. Sorry, Bane. You're still alive in my heart.
About the whole no guns thing. I'm not sure I feel as strongly about it as you do.
Batfleck took that to heart a little too much. Does it get any cooler than Catwoman chasing down 2 tumblers on the Batpod with air support from Batman and the Bat? This movie may be lacking for action, but the missiles chasing Batman through the streets does not disappoint.
A hero can be anyone, even a man doing something as simple and reassuring as putting a coat around a young boy's shoulders.
It's funny. For as often as How It Should Have Ended's Batman says, I'm Batman, Bale Batman says it like once in the entire franchise? In fact, his go-to move is to quote people things they said to him as Bruce. Self-sacrifice. Sort of. I mean, Bale Bat died. Is it Cobb? Did he finally escape? Oh, it's just Bruce. But seriously, what a satisfying ending to this story. The Bat and the Cat together at last. And for those who felt like this relationship was forced, you're forgetting all the similarities between these two. The purpose of this film was to see Bruce leave Batman behind. And that's all Selina wants, to escape her past. From the first scene, that's the goal she's working towards. Then, when given an easy out, she chooses to stay and help. They wanted the same thing, but were willing to sacrifice that desire for the greater good. So they belong together, free of their past. Wait, the title of this movie was actually about the new Batman Rising? JK, but I do need to address this.
You should use your full name. I like that name. Robin.
I know a lot of people felt like this was a silly tacked-on Easter egg, which it was, but it was also a payoff to what they'd actually been setting up the entire film. First, Blake proves his merit to Bruce by correctly identifying Batman's secret identity while at the same time revealing the way that he figured it out is because of how similar he and Bruce are. And the rest of the movie is filled with setups for Blake to don the cowl.
The idea was to be a symbol. Batman could be anybody. If you're working alone, wear a mask.
And he's sort of Batman's sidekick throughout parts of the film anyway. Blake wanting more and being disillusioned with the typical forms of justice, throwing both his gun and badge away. Even his conversation with Gordon is like a lesson in becoming Batman.
One day, you may face such a moment of crisis, and in that moment, I hope you have a friend like I did.
We've spent enough time together now, you probably realize I don't like when things end. I was sad from the moment I heard Logan would be an adaptation of Old Man Logan and that it would be Hugh's last film as Wolverine, and things that happened in the movie made me even sadder. I was sad during the 78 endings of Return of the King, and this film also made me sad. I know all good things must end, and there's definitely something to be said for the Breaking Bad approach. End it while it's good, don't squeeze every last breath out of it until it's bad. Which brings me to the sadness of The Dark Knight Rises. We start with a retired and extremely broken Batman, unable to move on from Rachel's death, living like a zombie in a city that no longer needs him because of his sacrifice at the end of The Dark Knight, and that city also erroneously hates him for it. The company his father built is struggling. It's the end. To try to follow up The Dark Knight was a task I will never envy. And in a lot of ways, this film is more a spaced-out sequel to Batman Begins, with plenty of parallel themes and images. Even the villains are exacting revenge for the events of that film. And there is a lot going on thematically in this film. Not everything is fleshed out, or maybe not fleshed out the way people expected. There are a bunch of parallels with A Tale of Two Cities, beyond the fact that Gordon quotes it in the end, but I'm not going to get into that here. Wisecrack goes way in depth in their What Went Wrong video. Check it out. They also talk about how it's possibly a condemnation of the Occupy movement and a bunch of other stuff too. For me, more at the heart of this trilogy's narrative are the questions of who Bruce and Batman really are and what it means to be a symbol of justice. Harvey Dent was Bruce's first choice to replace him as Gotham's White Knight, a man without a mask. When Harvey failed to do so, Batman took it upon himself to make sure his legacy lived on in the Dent Act by becoming the villain. In the process, the symbol of what Batman was shifted. In the first half of this movie, he not only doesn't fear death, but welcomes it.
You're afraid that if I go back out there, I'll fail.
I'm afraid that you want to.
Why didn't you just kill me? You don't fear death. You welcome it.
Partially because of Rachel, which keeps him from being able to move beyond Batman as Alfred wants him to.
7 years I waited, hoping that you wouldn't come back.
But also because I think Bruce internalized the bastardization of his symbol more than he anticipated. I think a part of Batman's problem is that in allowing the symbol of Batman to be sacrificed as a scapegoat, he lost his identity. And that's where we're left at the end of The Dark Knight. This whole movie is like a metaphor for the secret that Harvey and Batman buried at the end of The Dark Knight, slowly rising from the sewers. In the end, this film gives Bruce some actual closure wherein the symbol has been redeemed and can live on with someone else wearing the cape, while Bruce is finally free. Gotham will always need Batman, but Bruce no longer does. While there are multiple meanings to the title, The Dark Knight does literally rise out of the pit, rises to the occasion. I believe it's more about him rising beyond his need for Batman. I have my problems with this film, and I agree with some of the popular criticisms. But while I am curious how Batman got back to Gotham, or how a swift punch to the spine fixed a slipped disc, it's not something that ruins the film for me, or even makes me utter more than a quick, In the realism that is the Nolan trilogy, there are liberties that still need to be taken in order to present an interesting Batman. And an interesting Batman is what we got. And I'll say an even more interesting Bane. I guess Bane was a dividing character more than I ever realized. Personally, I loved everything about him. His voice was so off-putting and not what you'd expect from such a brute. His physical stature was immense, his mannerisms were amazing, and he was so cold and calculated, closer to Moriarty than the goon that grunted around behind Poison Ivy. And we even got to see another side of him in the end, making him a complex character with not totally straightforward motivations. I don't think he cared at all about Ra's al Ghul's master plan. Instead, his allegiance was to Talia and was actually really sweet. And you've got to give Tom Hardy credit. The majority of the man's face was covered for the entire movie, and we still got the full range of emotion from him. His eyes tell more stories than some actors' entire faces. Heath Ledger still takes the cake, but goodness is Tom Hardy's Bane a close second. One other thing I love about Bane's plan is the flip of the Hans Gruber, "We're doing this for totally political reasons," only to find out it's for money. Whereas Bane says, "It's all for you, fight the power, down with the bourgeoisie," when really he's just going to blow them all up anyway, rich and poor alike. Christian Bale's performance was right on par with the rest of the trilogy. I think he toned the back growl back a bit for this one, so there's that. But his broken down Bruce in the beginning was heartbreaking and made his rise all the more satisfying. I've never gone into it too much, but one of my qualifiers for always a win status is the ability to disappear into a role. To a point where if you don't know or don't necessarily follow a particular actor's career, you'd be surprised to find out they were in X. And then thrilled when you realize they were the best and your favorite part of X. That's Gary Oldman in a nutshell for me. Just go through comments and look for OMG, that was so-and-so? I never knew! Those actors are generally always a win. He's like the best character actor that ever lived, yet he's a leading man. As we talked about briefly, Selina is a master of controlling situations through her ever-changing veneer. She actually describes herself best.
I'm adaptable.
I thought she was another great addition to the Dark Knight trilogy. Even I was wary of adding Catwoman to the realistic world, but man, if Nolan and Hathaway didn't nail it. While there are some awesome moments, this movie is actually bigger than the sum of its parts. The exposition, narrative, and character building that's done don't always have easy moments to pinpoint, but together they add to the overall film. You've also probably noticed that my voice is a little off this week, and that's because I'm sick, getting sicker. I pushed a little too hard this week with this cold, so I'm going to take next week off. So there won't be a video. Just a heads up. Maybe a 60-second review if I can drag myself to the theater, but I promise the week after is something to get excited about. Thanks for understanding.